Hi, Wendy. Welcome to all of our viewers out there, our schools that are watching our first live webinar. I'd like to introduce Wendy Porter. She's our product specialist for the schools, and she's going to be taking us through the first school system training live on a webinar. We've been doing this for 20 years.
20 years, yeah, long time.
20 years, but it's our first time doing a live session for our school market. And we're so excited to be able to present you live in your own environment, where you can talk about how to credit vet your prospective parents. Because last year we did a survey to our school, well, not just to the schools that are part of the TPN community, but all schools around the country. And it was public schools, private schools, high schools, nursery nursery schools, the range. And we asked about 20 different questions. Well, we asked a question that said, what is your biggest challenge as a school? And we gave 20 different options that we felt might be a school challenge.
Relevant, yeah.
Right? Bullying, substance abuse.
Late attendance, substance abuse, all of those, yeah.
And school equipment, textbooks. And one of the options were school fee collections. And at that point, we got feedback that said 70% of schools felt that their biggest challenge was school fee collections. And for the last 12 months, we've been looking at the school fee parent payment profile good standing ratio. And we've seen how that has deteriorated over this pandemic period, from 69% of parents in good standing with their school fees down to 48% during this lockdown period. Still currently at 48% of parents are in good standing with their schools at the moment. So just to remind our schools, if you don't know what good standing is a parent that is in a zero balance at the end of the month in terms of their school fee statement. And that includes any arrears balance brought forward.
Yes, they've caught up the arrears as well, if any, yeah.
It's the invoiced amount and any sundries that might have been added onto the account. And at the end of the month, that account is 100% up to date. And that would mean the parent would be in good standing with their account. And currently at the moment, that is sitting at 48%. So today's session is about saying, well, how do we strategize towards collections using a credit bureau? For our public schools, it would be about exemptions. So parents that are legitimately applying for exemptions at the moment, as they're entitled to do, how does the school use the credit bureau in order to determine whether that parent qualifies or not? And for our private schools, it would be understanding the parents that are applying for maybe discounts at the moment. Maybe they're applying for payment plans. And using credit bureau data to ensure that those parents are being placed on plans that they can then meet the repayments, or if they have seriously suffered during the pandemic in terms of loss of income, how do they then apply discounts fairly to parents that would then apply for them?
Based on the credit information.
Based on the information on the credit profile.
Yes.
So the agenda for today, folks, what we're going to do is I'm going to hand over to Wendy. She's going to spend the next 45 minutes taking us through the credit bureau inquiry on a parent. And I'm going to disappear into the studio, but I will still be here facilitating the questions and answers. So you'll see there's a chat space, and you're able to enter your questions on the chat, and I'll be answering them on the chat. Or if it is something that you feel that Wendy didn't cover and you are still a little bit unsure about what she's been showcasing, we can then bring her back and I can say, Wendy, won't you just re-go over, for example, what does a zero mean on a payment profile? We're a little bit unsure there. So please log into YouTube to be able to enter your chats. At the end, in the last 15 minutes, we're going to open up for Q&A. So if you have any questions that are not pertinent to the credit bureau inquiry that we're looking at the moment, please feel free to add them to the chat. And then in the last 15 minutes, we'll address those questions. And at the last 15 minutes, we're also going to put out our feedback form. So if you would, I'll put out a link. You can then click on the link and you can give us feedback as to the session. Not only does it help us, and I promise you, we take criticism very, very well. So please be honest with us. Share your experience. because it'll help us to improve for the next session. And if you've got topics that you want us to address, then please enter those into the suggestions, and we'll address those. Our next webinar is early
7th of October.
7th of October.
For schools.
Yes. And we're going to be doing letters of demand,
correct,
blacklisting,
loading of data, all the collection tools. But for today's session, we're going to do the inquiry side of it first.
Fantastic. So Wenz, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thanks, Mish.
Thank you.
Morning, ladies and gents. As Michelle said, this is our first school webinar, and I can tell you, as I'm standing here right now, please excuse me if I stutter or fumble over my words, because I am a bit nervous given the fact that it's my first time, but yeah, just bear with me. Right, so you've all received your usernames and passwords. You obviously then need those to log on to the TPN website in order to perform your inquiries. If you have not received your login details or you've forgotten them, please drop our help desk an email and they'll be happy to sort you out. So what you'll then do is log on to the website. At the top right, click login, and here is where you're going to go and fill in your username and your password. Log in. When you perform any credit inquiries on an individual, you must have their consent. Initially, when we send through your login details, we attach 2 consent clauses in the email. One is where you are going to employ new individuals, that consent clause, and the second one would be for your parents, if you're going to be doing a credit search on your parent applications. So once you have got your consent preferably signed, you can then go onto the credit bureau and perform your credit inquiries. You'll click on the heading at the top, credit checks, and the first option on the list is perform a new consumer credit check. So the first inquiry I'm going to do is doing an inquiry on a parent. When we have gone through this information, I will then show you how to perform inquiries for employment purposes. And then the last set of inquiries I'm going to show you is for schools doing criminal checks for the purposes of being in compliance with the Sexual Offences Act. But for now, we're going to do the credit inquiry on a parent. The point of doing a credit inquiry, particularly for private schools, is obviously you are wanting to gauge your risk in terms of, is this a good standing parent that I'm placing, meaning the probability of them paying their school fees going forward is a lot higher than somebody who's got a very poor credit profile. Because people are habitual. We do the same things all the time. If we are constantly paying our other accounts late, we're constantly going to pay our school fees late. So that's why one would perform a credit check to see what the behavior is of a particular parent. Obviously, for public schools, you've got your online application whereby you wouldn't be able to gauge risk. You don't have a choice. You can't base your decision on a credit check to accept parents or children into the school. However, when you perform your credit inquiry, once that online application has been accepted and the parent then comes and gives you their supporting documentation, you can then verify the information that they've given you on that documentation against the credit bureau information displayed on a credit report, and that way you then can verify the information is true, accurate and correct. Right, when you click on the credit inquiry, this inquiry reason for the purposes of doing a check on a parent, you will always select it as rental/setting limit for goods or services, because you're obviously being schools, you're in the service industry. You will also need the person's ID number, name, surname, address, and cell phone number. If you are going to perform an inquiry on a passport number, you simply click on this blue link, you change it to passport number, but then you will also need the person's country of origin and date of birth. Once you have filled in all the fields of information, at the bottom you click Next. For schools, this credit score version, all schools, both public and private, always choose the option that says Basic Credits. Don't worry about filling in the net income and the total installments and contributors. You leave those fields blank. And then you'll notice that the ID verification inquiry is already ticked for you. And again, I come back to this National Credit Act compliance declaration. The system again is asking you, have you got consent to run this particular inquiry on the individual? So you'll tick the box, yes, I do have consent. Click next. Because you're a data provider, you will have access to the TPN Smart Check inquiry. For those schools, if you get to this screen and you see there's a big red block that says you do not have access to Smart Check, please give me a call, or you can speak to any one of our data team members and we will help you and assist you in terms of getting your data onto the Bureau. Perform credit check. So what we do on the inquiry is we first put up a summary page for you. Basically what this does is it highlights the important points from the Credit Bureau information of the inquiry. First up is your ID verification. This information comes straight out of the Home Affairs database. It will verify if the person is married, if their name and surname match, the ID number, and of course it shows you a photo of the individual as well. Further down, that credit score where I mentioned you selected as basic, this is what the scoring actually looks like. It ranges from A to F, A obviously being excellent and F being poor. And the reason why this particular individual has got a poor rating is because you can see of the negative information, there is 2 judgments against them and 1 default. And of course, if you have a look at their traditional credit information, which comes from TransUnion's database, you can see of all their credit and service agreements, they're only 75% in good standing. You heard earlier on Michelle mention good standing. And then, of course, on the TPN's database, which includes your leases, your levies, and, of course, your school fee data, this particular individual is only 13% in good standing. Further down, it will then highlight those judgments and defaults in red, and it will show you on which credit bureau that information sits. The beauty about this Smart Check inquiry is you can, at a glance, you can assess affordability. So this particular individual, and this is live data we took from our database, this particular individual owes 1.8 million rands worth of debt as a total. In order to pay all those accounts, he has to pay 108,000 Rand every single month, of which you can see he's already 500,000 Rand in arrears. So let's take it into a realistic picture. If you as a school, particularly a private school, if you have your application, obviously the parent has given you supporting documentation, including the payslip, you can then see, okay, this particular individual, he as a current balance owes 50,000 Rand in debt. His monthly installments that he has to pay out is 18,000 Rand. The payslip says he only brings home 23,000 Rand. That leaves him with 8, 9, 10, 5,000 Rand, of which he needs to put in petrol, pay lights and water, and then, of course, pay school fees, buy food. Straight away, you can then see, okay, my school fees are 3,000 Rand a month. He's not going to be able to afford my school fees. So from an affordability point of view, you can then make a quick assessment at this point. For public schools, again, this information will come handy for when parents apply for exemptions. You can then have a look and see what sort of debt they're in, and again, base your exemption process on affordability. Okay, then further down, it just gives you addresses, telephone numbers, the general information of individuals. Then to view each particular inquiry, on the TPN tab, this is going to show you our own TPN database, which includes, as I mentioned, levies, leases, and school fee data. So we've obviously, again, this is live data, we've made up names, but this particular parent, this is a parent, he rented property from one of our landlords who subscribed to TPN. And as you can see, every month he paid his rent on time and in full. Of course, we then sent him that SMS to say your credit profile is positive because you've paid rent every single month on time and in full. Great. Then a school signed up with our TPN system and they then loaded their school fee data for the same individual. And you can see in 2019, when we loaded the data in February, this particular parent then got the SMS to say, you have partially paid your school fees. Your credit profile has been adversely affected. So straight away he thought, uh-oh. Of course, March, he then received a second SMS to say you've partially paid your March's school fees. And immediately in April, he caught up the outstanding fees and he paid his school fees on time and in full. So the power of payment profile is what is going to change your parents' behavior. Loading of your school fee data is going to change the parents' payment behavior. And if I just quickly want to show you the SMS notifications that go out. So on these particular ones, you can see, thank you for paying your August rent on time. Your TPN record has been positively updated. For the school fee SMSs, it will go out saying, thank you for your September school fees on time. Your credit record is positively updated. Or over here, you can see credit record alert, only part of your March's school fees was paid. Your TPN credit record has been adversely affected. So that SMS is what creates this awareness in your parents' mind that their credit profile is either going up or being adversely affected, and that is what's going to change the payment behavior of your school fees. Right. On the employment tab, again, this is another database that TPN stores, which is unique to us. On the employment tab is where you are going to get a breakdown of which companies a person has previously worked for, or if they are currently employed. It's going to give you their position, their period of employment, and if they've left, their reason for leaving. This employment data is used twofold. So A, you can use the employment information when you as a school are wanting to employ new staff members. B, excuse me, for public schools, they use this employment data for when parents apply for exemptions. So as you know, parents will come along and they'll say, oh, I'm unemployed and I want to apply for a full exemption. When you have a look at our TPN employment data and you see the person is currently employed, it obviously means they're earning an income. Why then are they applying for a full exemption? Similarly, this information is used when parents apply for partial exemptions. You can then verify, yes, the person is working, and based on that, you can then go and have a look at their TransUnion report and check to see what the credit information looks like to see if the person can afford that partial exemption. On TransUnion's tab, again, it will give you the person's general information, also known as names, are they married, telephone numbers, cell numbers, etc. And further down, and again, this information is only available on the Smart Check inquiry. It will also give you a breakdown of which accounts the parent has open. So is it personal loans? Is it retail? Is it vehicle finance? Whatever it might be, it will tell you what. So this particular individual has got a Markham's account. It will give you the opening balance. It will give you the monthly installment. And here it will then give you a breakdown of how they've paid their traditional credit agreements on a monthly basis. You'll notice TransUnion's displays their payment profile a bit differently to TPN. We display it as paid on time, paid late, partial payment, whatever it is. TransUnion displays it as numbers. So a 0 will mean that the person is on time and in full for that particular month's installment. If you see, for example, this cell C account, yeah, you see there's 1s, 2s, and 3s. It means they're 1 or 2 or 3 months behind in terms of the monthly installment. Right at the bottom, I just want to bring to your attention, if you perform an inquiry and, sorry, I'm just getting to it. If you perform an inquiry and you see an individual has got a microloan account, nothing wrong with having a microloan account. The problem with this is people can very quickly get into financial stress. So what happens is an individual will need 5,000 Rand this month. So they go off to a microloans company, they get the loan of 5,000, and then at the end of that month, the loans company takes that 5,000 off as a debit order plus interest. So next month, when the person receives their salary, they are 5,000 Rand less. So what do? They go and get another microloan. And so it keeps on rolling every month because the person is short of money. So just be careful when you see microloan information. Nothing wrong with it, but it could mean that the person is in financial distress. At the bottom is query information. So whoever out of TransUnion or TPN members have done a check on the individual will display under consumer inquiries. If you see in a short space of time, 2 weeks, there is inquiries performed by the credit providers, the telecommunications companies, whatever it might be, and you see these inquiries, boom, 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 one after the other in 2 weeks space, in a 2 week stretch, it could mean that the person's identity has been compromised. In other words, it could mean identity theft, where whoever it is that has the ID is now going around to the credits and service providers looking to see what credit they can obtain under this particular person's ID number. So query information, just make sure that there isn't any unusual activity going on at the bottom. Right, I just want to scroll up. One more thing that I want to mention, is on the TPN tab. Remember I spoke about the leases. Again, public schools. If a parent claims to be in your feeder area and they rent property, again, you'll be able to verify the lease information that they've given you matches that they actually do live in that particular property. Similarly, the deeds tab in the Smart Check inquiry, if a person, again, is in your feeder area and you and they own property, you can verify the ownership of that property and the address to confirm that that information is true and correct. Right, that is your inquiry on a parent. The next inquiry I'm going to show you is for employment purposes. So again, you'll click on the heading Credit Checks, perform a new consumer check. This inquiry reason then will need to change. If the position of employment handles cash and finances, you will select that option, handling cash and finances. If the position does not handle cash and finances, you then need to select the option at the bottom, employment/qualification verification. And this is very important to understand because if the position involves handling cash and finances, you then are allowed to have a look at the TransUnion report. In other words, traditional credit information that the person has. Because if, for example, you see a person is financially strained because they've got judgments, defaults, their payment profile is not up to scratch, and you employ them as a bookkeeper, there is a risk involved because perhaps they start, I don't know, siphoning money out of your account or whatever the case might be. Because they're financially strained, the risk is too high. Versus if the position does not handle cash and finances, even if somebody has got a judgment or default, it doesn't mean they can't do the job at hand. Which is why if the position does not handle cash and finances, you're actually not allowed to go and have a look at their traditional credit information. That being the case, you only then have a look at the TPN employment information. So whatever the case may be, that inquiry reason you select, again, you will fill in the fields of information of the individual. Click Next. Select your credit score as basic. Yes, I've got consent. Click Next. And then you will notice on this screen, you will have on your live system, you will have the TPN employment verification inquiry. At this point, you can then go if you want to perform a qualification inquiry as well. So if it's a teacher applying for a position and you want to verify that the qualifications are true and legit, select the qualification block at the bottom, perform inquiry, and then you'll notice the system will ask you what qualification you're actually wanting to verify. So it will ask you the name of the qualification, the year completed, the institution, etc. Click Finish. The qualification inquiry takes between 24 hours to a week, depending on A, the qualification, and B, where the qualification was obtained. So if you have a qualification that was obtained in America, that inquiry is obviously going to take a lot longer. If you have a qualification obtained in South Africa, that's when it will come through fairly quickly, within 24 hours. On your qualifications tab, when the inquiry is complete, you will then go and view the actual qualification to say, yes, it is, it's currently under investigation, or yes, it has been awarded. Right, the last inquiry I'm going to go through is the criminal check for the purposes of the Sexual Offences Act. So all schools need to be compliant with the Sexual Offences Act. Basically, the long and the short of that is if you have employees or employees at a school may not have a sexual conviction against a minor. So in order for you to know if a person has got a conviction, you would have to perform a criminal check. So that would be point one. Bearing in mind you need consent again to perform the inquiry. Click on credit checks, perform a new consumer check. This inquiry reason for the purposes of criminal checks, again you'll select employment/qualification verification. Fill in the person's details, click Next. Select your credits. Yes, I've got consent. Tick the box. Next. And on this list of inquiries, right at the bottom is your TPN criminal check. Once you've performed the inquiry, again, it's going to ask you consent and click Finish. For each individual that you perform the criminal check on, you're going to get emailed what we call a ticket number. It's a CRC number. At this point, all criminal inquiries have to have fingerprints to go with it. You can either phone me, I then come on site to your school and I capture the individual's fingerprints, or we do have fingerprinting station hosts in South Africa. You can send your applicants off to one of those hosts to have fingerprints done. Once the prints are locked into the system, within 24 to 48 hours, your TPN system will update to say no illicit activity or possible illicit activity. In the case of possible, TPN receives the criminal check result, of which I then facilitate that. I email it through to the head of the school on what that actual conviction is for. If the conviction, however, is for a sexual offense against a minor, I don't email that through. We literally hand deliver that actual conviction to the head of the school. Just a bit of information. Should a school be in contravention of the Sexual Offences Act, so either the school decides they're not going to do criminal checks on their staff, or a criminal check has come through where it is a conviction against a minor, and the principal or the head of the school decides to continue having that person employed at the school, the Registrar of Sexual Offences, they currently, or they do inspections at schools, checking to see that schools are compliant. In the event where a school is non-compliant or the head has decided they're going to continue having an employee with a conviction against a minor at the school, the head of that school could be imprisoned for up to 7 years. That's with regards, the Sexual Offences Act explains that. So what I'm saying is, as a school, make sure that all your staff are clear of sexual offences against minors. For public schools, obviously the department runs the criminal check first before placing the teacher or whoever it is at the school. However, it's advisable to perform your criminal checks both on your SGB members as well as your departmental staff members. Remember, the inquiry is not only for teachers. The criminal check also extends as far as your coaches, your ballet school teachers, your on-site psychologists, in other words, anyone who is in contact with children will need to undergo this criminal check process. Right, ladies and gents, last up, the trace inquiry. So this is a very popular inquiry among schools. This is where you are wanting to find out updated contact information of a person. So let's say last year, December, a particular parent has now left the school, but they still owe you money. And you want to know what is their latest cell number or what is their latest address or whatever the case might be. You can perform the trace inquiry, which is the third option down. And you can search under 3 different search fields. Either you can search under the ID number if you have it. If not, you can search under the surname and date of birth. And failing that, you can also then search under a telephone number, be it a landline number or a cell number. Again, you'll fill in the fields of information. This inquiry, you do not need consent to run a trace inquiry. What the system does is it then lists all the people whose, whatever search criteria you put in, so if it's a phone number, it will then list all the people that are associated with that particular phone number. More often than not, you will find the person that you're looking for is generally at the top of the list. Once you've selected your individual you're looking for, you open the inquiry. This trace inquiry looks at our TPN rentals database, our employment database, and it also looks at TransUnion's database. And you will notice it will then give you the updated addresses, telephone numbers, etc. Okay, ladies and gents, that is all from me. I apologize if it is a bit short, but again, it's just nerves.
Wens, I've got some questions for you.
Yes, fire away.
So the first question that we had was on the school fee recovery pack on the shop.
Okay.
If we could just talk through, I've been answering some of the questions, but not everyone might be reading the chat. So if you could just talk through the school fee recovery pack and where to go and get it.
Okay, so the school recovery pack we introduced at the start of lockdown. If you are wanting to go and purchase the pack, when you log onto the TPN site, the home page, I just want to go there quickly and show you. Okay. On the home page, sorry, I can't find it now, but on the home page at the top right, you'll see there's a heading called shop. No, sorry, not shop. Documentation packs. If you click on there, you'll see the school recovery pack is listed there. So the school recovery pack was brought in at the point of lockdown, where we realized some parents might not be able to pay their full school fees. And they would then approach you and say, look, I'm not able to pay 1,000 Rand, but I can pay 500 Rand. That documentation that's in the school fee recovery pack, you would then get your parent to complete, and that would be an official agreement that you would use then for the parent to pay 500 Rand a month until such time as whatever's written in your agreement that you agree on, where they start catching up the school payments. Does that answer that question, Mish? Is there anything more you want to add to that?
Yeah, so what we realized was that parents would come and approach the schools and say they'd like to apply for a discount or repayment or an exemption. And so TPN created an income declaration document as part of the pack where the parent would then submit why they were short of income.
Yes.
Yeah. Was it permanent? Was it temporary? Was it partial? Was it in full? And then also have to submit supporting documentation to support that that declaration. The school would then be able to be in a position to say, well, let me credit check the parent. We've got the income declaration, the consent is there. Let's credit check the parent and understand exactly the position that the parent's in. Financial position.
Yes.
A parent that has a history of non-performance, maybe isn't going to qualify for a repayment plan. Same as what the banks did. The banks also gave payment holidays.
That's right.
But the payment holidays were based on you were in good standing prior to the lockdown. You weren't coming into lockdown already
in default.
Exactly
Yes.
right. So you could then give the parent the opportunity to have either a discount or a repayment plan. But it was really, really important that that was documented properly, and you weren't entering into plans with parents without having an agreement in place where repayment could then happen. It also means that if the parent then defaults on that repayment plan, it's really easy to take that to the courts to go and get judgment if the amount is quite high. And we made it for free. So absolutely, it's still there.
It's free. You can still use it.
It's a free documentation pack because it's. The schools are suffering with overall 48% good standings. So any effort that we could do to try and encourage parents to come to the party and enter into terms to repay. So that's the school fee recovery.
And exactly that. The credit check on TPN certainly plays a huge role in terms of. Is the parent in good standing, what their financial status is at that point?
Absolutely. Now, the second question that we've got going on at the moment is in terms of consent and a smart check. So as we know, if you want to do a smart check on a parent, you absolutely 100% need to have consent. And the TPN consent form says the parent agrees that or consents to an inquiry being performed on their credit profile at this point in time and any point in the future.
Whilst you're doing business with them.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Whilst they're a debtor. But we also have the online monitoring, which I know we haven't showcased today, and we'll showcase that in a future session.
Yes.
But on the online monitoring, when our clients, our schools, load their data with TPN, it doesn't matter if that data is loaded manually, as is the case with one of the delegates today. So you can load your data manually with TPN, or you can use your school software to import the data with TPN. So like, for example, D6, Pastel, there are other systems that we import the data from. If the data is then on the TPN system, and you go to your monitoring portal with TPN and all your debtors, because they are current clients, the National Credit Act allows us, because we're rescoring all of your debtors for your debtors every month, it allows us to do a credit check on your parents even though you don't have consent. So this is one of the areas in the National Credit regulations that allow our schools to do credit checks without consent. And I think
based on data submission.
So Wendy, on the 7th of October, when we do our next webinar, let's focus on that online monitoring as part of because the collection process is not a single process. It's not, I sent a letter of demand. It's a process. It's not a single step. Let's showcase how you can credit check your parents without the need for a credit check. Exactly. And then the last one I've been asked to just quickly address is the legislation. I know we're going to talk about how to do a letter of demands and blacklistings, but if we can share the legislation around schools sending out letter of demands in terms of the Schools Act and then in terms of the National Credit Act, and then legislation around blacklisting, preparing everyone for the session next month.
Next month, okay. So when sending out letters of demand for a public school, obviously Section 41 of the Schools Act applies. In our TPN letters of demand, that information, or at least that wording, is already in. You send letter of demand the minute a parent goes into default. That letter of demand also gives the parent 20 business days to remedy their breach. Failing which, after the 20-day period, and the parent is 3 consecutive billing cycles in arrears, then you would be able to go and blacklist the parent. For public schools, it also gives the parent 20 business days before a default listing is loaded. But in terms of the Section 41, you as a public school need to give the parent 90 days notice before taking legal action. Bearing in mind, loading a default and taking legal action is 2 different scenarios. So our TPN letters of demand for public schools is all in line with the Schools Act. Obviously, private schools, the letter of demand in terms of the National Credit Act and the Consumer Protection Act is included in your TPN school letter of demands. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, I'm happy with that, Wens. I've just had a question on partial payments. I'm typing it in, but I'm worried that I might not have made my point adequately. So in terms of partial payments, and the parent made full payment for the current invoice, but there's an arrears balance. What is the parent updated as?
The parent will still be updated as partial payment, because remember, if your school fees are 1,000 Rand a month, and for 2 months they haven't made any payment, but now in September they come and pay you 1,000 Rand, it's not allocated to September school fees. It's allocated to July school fees, which means there is still a balance outstanding for last month and September, which means September's payment flag then gets updated as either partial payment or did not pay, depending on what that outstanding balance is. Right. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. And then Wens, I've been asked about EduPack. I've shared with the users that we're busy in testing at the moment.
Yes.
And hopefully then by October we'll be loading. I've shared your data at TPN email address so that our EduPack users, please start liaising with Wens in terms of your EduPack submission from October. And then I've been asked about EdAdmin.
Okay, EdAdmin, we have approached them with regards to loading of data. I do know there was some hiccup at some point. Obviously, then, of course, lockdown happened and things all fell flat. But EdAdmin, is it Ed? Because there's 2. There's EduAdmin and there's EdAdmin.
EdAdmin.
EdAdmin. And I think if I stand under correction, it is EdAdmin, where we obviously need to follow up with them again with regards to that development. But I stand under correction because the 2 are so close, EduAdmin and EdAdmin. I'm trying to think which one is the one that said that. Anyway, it's fine. As soon as we get feedback from EdAdmin, I'll be sure to send out all our EdAdmin members what the progress is on that development.
Fantastic, Wens. I think that's pretty much concluding our session today. I don't see any more questions that we need to answer. I'd just like personally to thank our schools for joining us today. It's been really fantastic hosting them. And Wens, well done on your first live webinar.
Oh, thanks, guys. Thank you very much. And thanks very much for joining us. And don't forget, next month, on the 7th of October, is the collections data loading that we are going to specifically talk about. And of course, as Michelle mentioned earlier, the monitoring aspect around that as well.
And the feedback form. I've just loaded the feedback form.
Oh, yes. Don't forget, please, don't forget to fill in the feedback form. And also subscribe to our YouTube channel. And don't forget to ring the bell.
Thanks.